All right, so tonight, talking about deep ecology and metaphysics. So the first point there is that that's controversial itself. In talking about ethics, ecology, environmental ethics, why would we talk about metaphysics? So I got in big trouble when I listened to a Donald Dworkin speech. That was probably 20 years ago. I guess I still haven't let go of it. Time to let go of it, I guess. But anyway, I brought up a metaphysical question during his talk of ethics, and he got very angry. So, because, one view is ethics has nothing to do with metaphysics. So when you're talking about right and wrong, principles of justice, there's no reason to talk about anything metaphysical, like dualism versus monism, like we'll mention tonight, anything like that. But anyway, I beg to differ. So I think ecology gives us a good example of that when we talk about ecology and environmentalism, because again, we're talking still about social justice, right? That metaphysics has everything to do with it. That when you talk about ethics, somewhere under the surface, metaphysics is lurking. And I think very clearly here it is. Why? Well, does the environment have rights? Are the rights of the environment inherent in the environment, or are they inherent in something else? So, you read some Plato. There's the realm of the forms that is spaceless, timeless. That's where the principles of justice reside, in the form of the good. And so that is what we're held accountable to, and to try and implement the best we can within nature. So it's not that nature itself has rights. It's that, now moving away from Plato, there's different conceptions. What are the rights inherent in? So, for example, if I took your cell phone here and I smashed it with my fist, right? Then probably I wouldn't be apologizing to your cell phone. I better be apologizing to you, right? Because it's your phone. And so by virtue of it being your phone, my damaging the phone was wrong because I violated you by violating your property. You know what I'm saying? So we're used to that way of thinking, but what if the rights adhere within the object? So in this case with environmentalism, on one conception, it's wrong to damage the earth. Whatever you mean by that, you can fill in the blanks. Why? Well, one could say because of, you look at the air quality in some major cities around the world, it's dangerous, it's bad, it's harming people's health, right? So for Kant, that would be wrong because you're violating people presently, right? Now, some would argue even harming future generations. Well, now, wait a minute, they don't exist. Yeah, but still, they're likely to exist, and you know that. And so, actually, they have rights. And we are responsible then for how we leave the earth for future generations. Or theism. So, God created the world. So, God is separate from the world. And we're responsible then for how we treat the environment, in this case, under that view, to God. So God is the artist, the world is the artwork. And so just as if you were to trash somebody's artwork, you'd have to apologize to the artist. So too here, right? And just as by looking at the artwork, you know something of the artist, well, in this case too. So the art and the artist are separate. So those are ways of grounding rights, more traditional, but really more traditional than that, going back to paganism, is the conception of the gods. So one of the gods being a goddess, Gaia, the earth, Mother Earth. So earth itself is a living being. Now, some will say conscious of itself, others will say not conscious of itself. But anyway, it's a living being that has rights. So by virtue of Earth itself being a goddess, to damage, harm, trash the Earth, you fill in the blanks, is to damage Mother Earth. So it's not because you harmed somebody else's artwork, it's not because of future generations, just because of that, not just because of harming the air quality for existing humans, but for the sake of the Earth itself, the rights reside there, in the Earth. So, anyway, this is why I think I'm willing to argue that to talk about environmental ethics and many other kinds of ethics, that, metaphysics is implicit. So you end up having metaphysical conversations about the nature of reality. It seems to me it makes a big difference. Where do the rights reside? In the object itself or in something else? And that affects your understanding of nature. So the two views we're looking at here then, one is dualism, where you have the immanent and you have the transcendent, and that could be Platonic, where, immanent within nature, to some extent, it conforms to a form, like a society conforming to the form of justice. But then the transcendent, the notion of justice itself, which is not spaceless, which is spaceless and timeless. Or, Augustine just sort of took those forms and put them in God's head. So it could be like this then. There's a God who is transcendent, who is not nature. And so rights, morality, reside in God. And so to some extent, more or less, we try to actualize within nature principles of justice because of looking to the transcendent, in this case God, and implementing those ideas within nature. So you got transcendence and you got immanence, right? But on another view is monism, and that's we only have the immanence. Everything is one, monistic, right? It's all one. So terms you could look up regarding this would be panpsychism, pantheism, and animism. Philosophers you'd want to look up in this camp would be Spinoza, Alfred North Whitehead, who wrote about process theology. And you still could smuggle in traditional sounding religious terminology, even in monism. So, for example, Teilhard de Chardin, so it's pronounced, it's spelled like tail hard, but anyway, Teilhard de Chardin, so he would talk about the cosmic Christ. So he would take Christian language and use it in a way, though, that was in line with, basically pantheism, monism. So he'll talk about Christ, but then and he'll talk about the Eucharist, but it's that earth is the Eucharist. The whole universe is the Eucharist, which is the body of Christ. So this is the cosmic Christ. So you could just as well use the terms Atman Brahman. So under Ramanuja's take, this fits very nicely with Hindu philosophy, theology, mysticism. Just a minute. And or God, or the ground of being. So this is process theology. So the idea is that the cosmic Christ, the Atman Brahman, God, whatever, the universe, is coming to consciousness of itself through us, such that when we become fully aware of our own human nature, that is the cosmic Christ becoming aware of his nature, the Atman Brahman realizing itself through our consciousness. So this has to do then, not just with justice then, but with salvation. So wait a minute, you're using overtly religious terms now. Well, yeah. So just like last week when we talked about process, the theology from Latin America. Help me out here. With liberation theology, there we go. Last week we talked about liberation theology, same sort of things where you take traditional sounding terms, but you're talking about liberation theology, which really is communism, using, in this case, terms of Christianity. So liberation theology, that was huge in Central America and got big here. Well, anyway, likewise, now we're doing the same sort of thing with process theology. So you're doing monism, pantheism, but you're using traditional terminology, but redefined. So how then does this have to do not just with justice, but then also like with salvation? Well, because you can just think of similarly with Buddhism. What is it in Buddhism, basically, to get saved? So I'm deliberately using a Western-type phrase, but so the phrase would be enlightenment, right? So how is it that one becomes enlightened? By realizing the Buddha nature, which everything is. So everything is this one nature, call it the cosmic Christ, the Buddha nature, the Atman Brahman, whatever. Of course, there's some distinctions with all of this stuff, but we're just using broad strokes here. So you have the one, the universe, coming to consciousness of itself through us. So that as we get beyond our false ego, which limits us into segregating things between this and that, right and wrong, up and down, black and white, yada, 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 all these sort of distinctions that we are always making is our wake-a-day consciousness, which is a deception, which holds us in this wheel of samsara, such that we keep coming back through reincarnation in this realm of suffering, until we break through from that into realizing the oneness of everything. And by doing that, one realizes one's true nature. So that thou art. You are the Buddha. You are the Atman Brahman. There is no me, you, this, that. Everything is one. So that's monism. Those are the philosophers you could look into for that. Well, anyway, this kind of deep ecology, which is a revival deliberately, explicitly, of paganism, is trying to re-enchant the world. Because the idea is that, well, first under Christianity, you have this distinction between God, the creator, outside of time, then the world, created in time, separate from God. So the transcendent and the immanent. Huge distinction here, right? Well, then, along comes the Enlightenment, and so-called, and which made a real distinction in Kant between faith and reason. So faith, the realm of fideism, versus reason, that which can be known empirically and analytically. And there's separate ways of knowing, if faith is any kind of knowing at all, right? So what does Athens have to do with Jerusalem? Said Tertullian. And similarly, Luther. So that's more of a classic Protestant view, such that, the mind is so corrupt that it's not capable of doing much of anything in regard to its own salvation or the salvation of society or understanding, unless one uses, as Calvin said, the lens of Scripture. Now, I'm in Holland, so I figure I can get away with this kind of language, because probably there's a lot of this talk here, right? So, oh my gosh, I'm in a state school, and again, I'm explicitly talking religion. Yeah, that's because actually that is what deep ecology explicitly is doing, is explicitly, emphatically religious. Now, often that religious element or the mystical element is sanitized. So if you're getting your news sources, from the mainstream network owned by the 5 big corporations or whatever, chances are it's, anesthetized for you. But anyway, if you look into deep ecology itself, do some research, you find that, yes, it is explicitly religious, explicitly philosophical. So, to do it justice, I think you have to be ready to use that kind of language. Well, anyway, so Calvin would talk about how you had to use the lens of Scripture in order, because of the corruption of our minds, in order, with God's grace, to be able to do science well, to understand it and then not be misled. And then, you still have that sort of thing within Catholicism, not to that extent. Catholicism didn't have such a separation between faith and reason, but nonetheless, still there to some extent. Well, anyway, then comes, from the Enlightenment and the split between faith and reason, then comes modernity, where we have explicitly so, like Max Weber in sociology, talking about the de-enchantment of nature. Explicitly de-enchant nature. All this talk of, early pagan talk of the divinities within nature, the nymphs and the fairies and the goddesses and the god of the waterfall and the god of the river and all this stuff. You know what? Now you don't say it like this because you want to be polite, you want to be multicultural, but basically it's sort of like this. You know what? They were a bunch of dumb shits. And they did what they could with their goofy language. So the animists, talking about the tree god, and ayahuasca is actually a god that you can take, and then you'll be acquainted with that god. And, primitive people, animists. But now that we have science, says modernity, we're beyond all that. So now we've disenchanted the world. Because now we don't need to say, oh my gosh, lightning, what's going on? I know, there's a god. Let's call him Zeus. He's mad, he's throwing these bolts around. They're like arrows, lightning bolts. That's a god Zeus doing that. And then thunder, oh, that's scary. We're so scared and we're a bunch of dumb shits. So what are we going to say? Oh, yeah, I know. Yeah, the gods are fighting. That's it, right? So, but then, thankfully, now we have science, and so we even disenchanted the world, and so we can know things mechanistically, scientistically, mechanically, looking at the parts and the logic and the process within time, very exact, right? We got Newtonian physics now. Science is going to save the world. We're beyond Christianity and religion and all this enchanted bugaboo, right? Now we're going to save the world. So again, am I deliberately using religious talk? Yes, I am, because that's very much what it was. We are going to conquer poverty. We are going to conquer injustice. We are going to conquer, even for transhumanists now, death itself. Look into Kurzweil. We will conquer death through science. Now, so yes, this very much has to do with religious-like themes. Bringing the kingdom of God on earth. Well, of course, they're not using the terminology, but they're talking utopia through science. Well, anyway, that got sort of hard to swallow, after World War I and nerve gas, and then World War II and the atom bomb, and then here we are into Vietnam. Really? You know what? It's what our reason seems to be doing for us, our mechanistic view, our de-enchanting nature. You know what it seems to be buying us? A whole lot of death and destruction. Not feeling it here. Not feeling the love. Not feeling the unity. Right? So philosophers then would look back to Nietzsche. So he's the philosopher of, post-modernity. And talking about how the modernists actually, and the Renaissance even, and the Enlightenment have all built on this Christian worldview. And they don't realize it yet, but that whole worldview, when the metaphysics of that collapsed, God is dead and we have killed him. What's going to happen when they do realize that, though, is if God is dead, all things are permissible. So they're going to find out in the 20th century, so Nietzsche was saying this in the 19th century, in the 20th century, that'll be the bloodiest one the world ever has seen. Well, there's certainly no doubt he was dead on, right? No question whatsoever. Of course he was right. Many tens of millions slaughtered in the 20th century, right? So that metaphysics collapsed, that groundwork, supporting traditional Western bourgeoisie kind of ethics, right? That collapsed, and so along with it went the ethics. Okay, then what were we left with? Well, you notice like sometimes at the X-Files where they don't really answer anything, and you can think of the Dave Matthews Band, which is like depressing as hell to me anyway. and then the common phrase, would be whatever. So you just walk around depressed and, well, got no answers. Great. Postmodernity. Okay, thank you very much, Derrida. Yes, we can question everything. We can take apart everything. We can criticize everything, and we're always left with nothing. And if we want to just come up with some fake stories for ourselves, to make yourself feel better, great, tell yourself something. What do you want to tell yourself? There's no way to determine right and wrong. So for Sartre, Jean-Paul Sartre, right, and his atheistic existentialism, in line with postmodernity, there are no grounds for any kind of ethics at all. So tell yourself whatever story you please. And you know what? Just do it. Okay, well now, some argue, and I think maybe it's too early to tell, but it seems to make some sense anyway, trying to make sense of what's going on in our culture and our world today, which is obviously under a lot of big changes. Well, one explanation of it, possibly, I don't know how plausible, look into it for yourself, probably too close to call, right? We're too close to it. But anyway, arguably, what's going on now is a postmodernity. A re-enchantment of the world. So, let's see now, a guy who talks like this. Actually, I got it right here. Carl Teichrieb, Game of Gods. So this is a point he harps on, makes. That, what's going on now, is a re-enchantment of the world. So people are saying, you know what? No, we're not happy with just whatever. Make up your own story. There's no ground anywhere. We just make up fictions. No, No, we're not going to live like that. Okay, so what are we going to do? Okay, everybody go back to church. No, we're not going there. So where are we going? Earlier. How early? The pagans. So there is a massive revival of paganism going on right now. So that includes Wicca. So in this stuff now, here in West Michigan, we're just not exposed to much of this sort of thing, So you have to get outside of your bubble and research a little bit and see that, what I'm talking about, it's really, really big. So, for example, one prominent Wiccan brother, I forget her name, she used to be a prominent NPR newscaster. Anyway, she, after she left NPR, retired, then she came out very clearly, vocally, that supporting Wicca. So that's getting huge. Especially like in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, massive there, right? Same thing with paganism, huge revival of it. Somewhat, well, especially I hear in like Toledo, Satanism, whether it's the theistic kind or the atheistic kind, especially the atheistic kind. But anyway, all of this sort of thing, what does it all have in common? Re-enchantment of the world, so that there is something to celebrate. There is a ground of meaning. There is a metaphysical ground to ethics. So started off in the early 70s like the Gaia hypothesis. So Gaia is the earth, Mother Earth. And fairies are real, ghosts are real. And you can come in contact with this stuff. So artificial intelligence, Saudi Arabia gave citizenship to a robot, right? What kind of sense does that make? It's an object. It's a thing. You're into the mechanistic way of thinking. You see, if everything is one, there's not person and non-person, animate and inanimate. Everything is animated by, call it what you will, the cosmic Christ, the Atman Brahman, God, consciousness, whatever. It is all the one nature. So, giving rights to a robot, to artificial intelligence, and one of the founders of it with Google literally worshiping it. Anybody remember the name of that? Didn't we look that up once? I forgot his name. Anyway, you can look it up. Google God, artificial intelligence, worship, whatever. You'll find it. Literally worshiping the artificial intelligence as a god. So that's how that could make sense. That's how that could incorporate with transhumanism also. So you see that this idea of humans evolving into a higher species, this stuff is just loaded with in Hollywood movies, right? Thor, the idea that the gods are coming back, right? Literally, the gods of the Greco-Roman period, or of witchcraft, or of Eastern religions, wherever, they're coming back. And they're being resurrected, they're being recommunicated with. So one thing you could look up would be finned horn. Look up finned horn. Again, you have to research a little deeper than just the pop common headlines that you'll run across. And you'll see that it's a very prominent organization where, well, you look into it. But anyway, people discovered, oh my gosh, there's all kinds of stuff growing here where it shouldn't really be growing. I think it was New Zealand.
How do you spell that?
Findhorn. Finned horn. And like, what the heck is going on here? So people would come in contact when they went there with Pan. Literally a god who would materialize in front of the person and talk with them. And explain to them how they should be gardening so that they're able to have this kind of success with gardening. In popular culture too, of course, like for example, there's tons of examples of it, but an example, one off the top of my head, is like Beyonce. So what does she give credit to the way that she's able to sing and dance? She says, I'd never be able to sing and dance the way that I do if it weren't for my being possessed. So before every concert, she says, just listen to this. This is in her own words, right? You'll find this interview very easily. So she says that she raises up her hands and she asks Sasha to possess her. And it does. She does. Yeah. And, you'll hear the same sort of thing with, another person who you know actually is a billionaire who talks about how to act the way that she did in a given movie. I'm deliberately just not saying it. I don't want to, I'm trying to trash talk people or something, because some people think of this as like, okay, that's out there. These people are nuts, right? But anyway, no, they mean it deliberately. And so anyway, she says that she actually gets possessed by a ghost. And that's how she's able to act the way that she did. So there's all kinds of talk like this. Now, again, in our West Michigan ears, this sounds like, you're crazy. You're out of your mind. Are you nuts? Really? Seriously? Well, we mentioned last week, I think, Burning Man. So there's other festivals like that all around the world. Sometimes Burning Man, I heard, actually sells out literally online within 1 second. So look up Burning Man. It's in northern Nevada. Look it up. And that's why I like you guys having your computers open. You're able to check things out on me right away, because I know I say some absolutely crazy stuff that you think I'm out of my freaking mind. I do that to keep you awake. You see, nobody's zoned out on me right now. So look up Burning Man in northern Nevada. Google is heavily involved in that. Now, I heard it came out in the news 2 days ago. I haven't actually verified it myself. That they own 51% of the company that runs Burning Man. So, in essence, what is Burning Man? Well, you've heard of Woodstock, right? So this is basically Woodstock on steroids. So, I mean, running around naked, having orgies, experimenting sexually with different kinds of sex that you've never had before in order to break on free to the other side, right? Expanding your consciousness, finding out who you are, whatever. And explicitly, calling on the gods. So this is paganism. And yes, Google is directly involved in it, very front and center, so much so that, well, even like the CEO of Google, I think it was I don't know if it was the present one or the previous one. Anyway, for him to get hired by Google as the CEO, it was required first that he attend Burning Man and that he be a successful attendee. That was part of the job description or his resume in order to get hired. So anyway, this stuff is big business. It's very popular. It has everything to do with deep ecology. I mean, if you want to go out there, I guess I've gone out there enough as it is already probably. But anyway, look up eco-sex. Now, you got to be careful when you do that and be careful what you click on, right? But anyway, if you find the right spots, what you will find is the vagina of Mother Earth is in Germany, and you can go there to have sex with her. Lots of people do. I mean it quite literally. People are marrying trees because a tree is a god. It's a person.
Wait, that's spelled echo, right? Like echo, EC.
Yeah, ECO. Now, what's what is this? I mean, we knew that from like when we studied Nietzsche a little bit, that who was the big whipping boy for Nietzsche? It was Christianity, right? Why? Well, because sort of along similar grounds, for Nietzsche, what was animating everything? It's the will to power, right? So it's this will not conscious of itself, not like this conscious God, but this, hey guys, can you be quiet? So this will is animates everything, and it's goes in line nicely with evolutionism. Same with Teilhard de Chardin. Very they piggyback it along with evolutionism, with the idea that that's how nature works. So that's how. So Nietzsche said what we should praise are the barbarians. Now we use the word barbarian, he said, in a negative connotation, as though it's a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. That's how people are going to become the wolf, not the lamb. How they will be strong and transform the human race into the Uberman. Through this allowing this will to power. Okay, well, what does Christianity have to do with that? Well, it's a big monkey wrench to that, right? It's that, hey, no, turn the other cheek, love your neighbor as yourself. Everybody's in God's image. Be good to those who persecute you, forgive those who've wronged you, right? All this kind of stuff. Well, Nietzsche said, okay, that's exactly the kind of thing then. What does that do? It keeps the powerful among us to hold themselves in check because they believe in this ideology so that they don't become the wolf that they are. Because they figure, oh, that would be bad. That's wrong. I can't do that. And so they hold themselves in check, and by doing that, they're not acting like the true animal that they are. And they're holding their nature down. They're not evolving because of that ideology. So similarly, with this kind of dualism, God is transcendent. Sure, God is present everywhere and presently sustains the world, but nonetheless, you've got this distinction between God and the world. So when you have that, instead of having the monism, what does that mean? Well, for one thing, that introduces the concept of guilt. Because then it's quite possible that the way that we are organizing society, it's not just that it's ignorant, unaware of our true godhood, but no, actually it's wrong because we're held accountable to this God who created the world, who created us, that we then are answerable to. So there's that possibility for this guilt factor. So what they do at Burning Man is they create a big church out of wood, and then they put it up on a big stilt to make it look like it's a mousetrap, and then they light it on fire. So their message, the symbolism there is quite clear, and again, they're explicitly going against Christianity. Now they got the reasons for it. These are the reasons for it, right? They're saying, hey, it's a mousetrap. Christianity makes you feel guilty. Christianity sees the world as a creation of God such that it isn't God. Get rid of those guilt feelings. You got to get rid of God. And to have the earth have rights in itself such that you need to treat the environment right for its own sake, not for the sake of somebody else, be it future generations or current people or a transcendent God. No, for the earth herself. She is, as we all are, a God. But if you have this dualistic view, that completely undermines all that. So the idea was Ehrlich, Paul Ehrlich, I think, right? An early environmentalist taught, again, explicitly why we need to get over Christianity, because it is what has primarily, along with modernity, supported this mechanistic view of nature, such that nature is separate from us, such that it's something we can mine, we can strip, we can rape, so to speak, for our own ends, for our own selfish pleasures. But instead, if nature is the goddess, and we all are, including the goddesses and the nymphs and the fairies and the other gods and all that, if we all are the one universe, which everything is, which is becoming conscious of itself, I mean, you hear this kind of talk, right? The universe is guiding me. You hear that kind of talk? This is the philosophy that is based on. So, I mean, you hear, if you're talking to a Muslim or a traditional Jew or a Christian, whatever, these Abrahamic religions, they're going to talk about God, right? God is guiding me. Well, in this sense, no, it's the universe is guiding me. That's not God in the Western Jew Abrahamic religion sense. So, in this then, one will, a way to get into the deeper ecology, to realize the deeper dimensions of nature, on your road to realizing the oneness of everything, it would be helpful to come to know these gods. So you go to a festival or you do certain, meditative practices, which are in big business, which are very popular, which are totally, promoted and accepted now, right? But take it another level. So, get into whatever it is, Wicca or paganism, for the purpose of communing with your spirit guide. So I went to this stuff is, you're thinking, come on now, you're talking Woodstock still, right? You're talking the New Age movement still. Well, yeah, this is very much as bedrock in America anyway. It's Genesis. It's coming front and center. Yeah, it was from the 60s. It's that same movement, basically. So back in, let's see, I went back to college and I took some class. It was like the mid 80s, I guess. I don't know, probably 88, something like that. And well, it happened to have been a Franciscan college, and so I thought, well, yeah, it'd be cool to take a class on spirituality, spiritual formation. And so, the lady there who taught it, she taught it for many years. And she explained how she knew as a child that there was a spirit under her bed. And then when she grew up older, she realized that the spirit was it manifested to her as a wolf. And so she regularly communes with this wolf spirit. Now, again, to contemporary American ears, especially in West Michigan, it sounds like, come on, you're kidding me, right? But I mean, this has just been like the world over, the century's over. New to our ears, but there's nothing new to this at all, right? I mean, this is ancient, and this is worldwide. Now, we've learned to take what they would think of as our scientific explanations, demythologizing this, disenchanting the world. So our explanations of, for example, okay, somebody help me out here. What's the name of the spirit that, when you, now what we're going to call it is sleep paralysis, right? But the old word for it, the paintings where you see somebody laying in bed and they're looking up and there's this gnome or whatever looking over them. You know what I'm talking about?
Rumpelstiltskin.
No. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Anyway, I'm forgetting the name of it. Well, anyway, plenty of people have this sort of thing where they will give this kind of explanation that, I've talked to people like this, where, and they're very intelligent, very, knowledgeable, very disciplined people, too, by the way, who know they're not on any drugs either, who will say that, yes, periodically I have the experience of sleep paralysis. I can't move. I can hardly breathe. I have night terrors. And yes, I will open up my eyes and I will see a big dark figure on my chest looking down at me. Well, now we're going to want to explain that away in terms of chemicals and, brain activity and yada yada. Well, anyway, that's perhaps then, on this view, a disenchanting of the world, okay? What if we have a re-enchanting of the world? What if it's more like the movies we see coming out of Walt Disney, where children are afraid of the monsters in their closet, right? Because the monsters like to scare them. But actually, the kids come to find out, like in the movie Monsters, right? I've only seen the ad. I didn't actually see the movie. Wasn't it called Monsters?
Monster Inc.
What? Monster Inc. Yeah, it's cute. It's adorable, right? Well, anyway, that's the message. There are spirits in your bedroom, in nature. You're afraid of them, but they're your friends. Matter of fact, if you let them take you over, well, you could be like Madame Blavatsky. So you look her up, and she's somebody who a lot of people attribute being sort of like the mother of the New Age movement. She very much influenced Aleister Crowley, called himself the wickedest man in the world. He was extremely influential in politics and, for example, the Beatles put them on their album, right? And his disciple was, I'm going to forget the name. I shouldn't forget this. A key founder of NASA. Somebody look that up, will you? The Aleister Crowley, NASA founder. I bet you find his name. It's sort of at the tip of my tongue. Tell me when you find it, will you? So, again...
Jack Parsons.
Yes, Jack Parsons. Thank you. So, yeah, this stuff that we're talking about, you're going to think of it as occult, New Age, hippie, whatever. But no, in big business, in big science, today, this stuff is front and center. Didn't I show you a clip of the CERN opening ceremony for CERN? No? Okay, look that up yourself. Look up the CERN opening ceremony.
That huge fusion reactor?
Yeah, for the fusion reactor. I think actually, though, this is for the tunnel of it. So if you look, I guess if you type in like CERN tunnel opening ceremony, if you want to, and we have time at the end of class, we could show a little clip of it. But anyway, it's, you watch that, and it's like directly occult overtones all over it. Yeah.
So I don't really want to interrupt you, but I don't know what the plans were for the...
Yes, because we got 2 presentations. Yeah. I'm glad you did.
Sorry, I didn't want to...
No, you're saving me, because I'll talk the whole night through, and then that'll be the end of the time for the group. So, no. Yeah. You blame him. Now that you have to present, it's his fault, okay? All right, well, anyway, I think we kind of presented this stuff. So what's the moral of the story? Okay, so I want you to walk away with 2 morals of the story first, okay? That is, number 1, that if you're going to talk about environmental justice, and you want to do it with broader, deeper understanding, yes, you're going to have to do metaphysics. And number 2, in doing that metaphysics, yes, it will be explicitly religious. You know, unplug your virgin ears, get over it, take a walk on the wild side, and you will see that, yes, it's overtly religious, talking about, spirits animating nature, communing with the spirits. And this notion of reanimating nature, being against the mechanistic view of modernity, which came from the view of Christianity. Same thing for all the Abrahamic religions, this notion of a God conscious of God's self, who pre-existed the world, who is transcendent from the world. Sure, he's immanent within the world in the sense of presently sustaining it, but is other than the world. And how that directly contradicts this philosophy of monism, that the universe, everything, is the one, whatever you want to call it, cosmic Christ, Atman, Brahman, God, becoming conscious of itself through our consciousness. So that your road to salvation then for yourself personally and for society and for the environment, all of it together, is coming to the realization that thou art, as it says in the Upanishads, right? That everything is this one nature. So now all I'm doing is just presenting these ideas. Sure, I've got my views. Sure, my views will kind of leak out here and there. I mean, I'm a person too, right? But anyway, I want to throw all this stuff out there to shock you a little bit out of complacency and to get you to broaden your horizons, look into different things, think for yourself, and understand that the kinds of things I'm talking about, I'm not trying to look under rocks for crazy things, wacko worldviews that really you never need to think about again anyway. No, I'm talking about current philosophical trends. Now, it's not going to be big in like American analytic philosophy, no. But worldwide, current trends in science and big business, this and environmentalism and justice, this philosophy of monism cannot be ignored. This notion of re-enchanting the world and going back to the gods. You're going to have to take that seriously and think what you think. It's up to you. All right, enough of that chat.